think we will get started then. So I want to say hello and welcome to everyone. Welcome everyone to EHRC's webinar on emotional intelligence, leadership success, and employee retention. Today's session will allow you to learn what and why emotional intelligence is important in leadership and professional success. For anyone that doesn't know who I am, I'm Marie Mold, and I'm the Senior Manager of Stakeholder Engagement here at EHRC. So just before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that the National Office of Electricity Human Resources Canada is located within the traditional unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. EHRC honors the peoples and the land of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation and all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples and their valuable past, present, and future contributions to this land. So just before we get started, a couple of housekeeping notes. This webinar is being recorded today and will be available on the ehrc.ca website as well as our YouTube channel. You can use the chat feature today to ask questions of our guest speaker, and we highly encourage it. So now it gives me great pleasure to introduce Angela Payne, who is the co-founder of Lead HR and the national president of Lean in Canada. Having spent her whole career in the human capital industry, Angela's interest and passion starts with people. Everyone who knows her recognizes her ability to make authentic and long-lasting connections. This superpower has enabled Angela to not only build and grow successful teams, but also become a strategic coach for many other leaders inside and outside of her organization. Angela is a certified emotional intelligence practitioner and a certified coach. She leverages these every day within her current role as co-founder of Lead HR and a leadership development firm focused on helping organizations measure, train, and improve the level of EQ in their leaders at all levels. So I am going to now send it over to Angela. Welcome, Angela, and over to you.
Thanks for attending and participating with us. And I just want to do a quick check now that we just screen share changed that you can see my screen there. So Marie, that's good?
Yes, all Perfect. Good.
Awesome. So welcome to the session today. We're online for approximately 45 minutes and happy to engage with the group here. One of the sessions that we're working on today is emotional intelligence and leadership success. As Marie said, I'm Angela Payne. In the day-to-day work that we do at Lead HR, we help organizations measure through assessments, understand and improve the level of emotional intelligence in their leaders at all levels. My talk today is entitled Emotional Intelligence and Leadership Success, looking at how leaders can use emotional intelligence not only just in their own success, but also to attract and retain talent, as it's a key component of that. And what we want to do is share information on helping you understand how emotional intelligence really empowers influential and inspirational behaviors in leadership. So we're going to look specifically at what emotional intelligence is, why it's important, what are some of the key leadership competencies attached to our emotions, and lastly, we want to give you some practical tips to help you take away and walk away on how to increase and manage and increase your own emotional intelligence, those of your teams or your leaders, and be able to share 2 ways to be able to do that. So that's our agenda for our time, and I'm happy to take questions. So if there's something that you really want to ask, please don't hesitate to drop it in the chat. There's a couple areas that I'm hoping you'll engage with me coming up early in the time, and please add that to the chat as we go. So all right. So a quick comment about Charles and I. Charles is my partner. We are longtime colleagues as the founders of Lead HR. One of the things that we've spent almost our whole career in is in the human capital space. And really, we came to emotional intelligence, inspired by our own personal journey of emotional intelligence. And so we are master certified trainers, as Marie indicated, and we spend a lot of time in multiple different forums that look at emotional intelligence and support not only leaders, but women also, and through my work at Lean In. So what we want to do is to help us understand emotional intelligence. I wanted to take all of you into a time machine and bring you back to the year 1998. And as we know, there's lots of great things that happened in 1998. 1998 was the year of the Nagano Winter Olympics. It was also the year that the movie Titanic essentially ruled the world. But 1998 was also a really important year for me, as in 1998, it's the year that I got married. And this is me in 1998. And at the time, there were lots of things that I knew about myself. One, I knew that I was done living under my parents' roof. I was free to be me. I knew that I had skills. I had worked hard to complete my degree. I had had multiple jobs through university, and I had done some part-time work and worked during the summer to gain experience. And I knew that I was more determined than most people, and I wanted to be really successful in my career. And there were lots of things that I didn't know. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, what industry I wanted to work in. Clearly from this picture, you can see I had no fashion sense, because who wears a daisy wedding dress and red lipstick? But hey, it was the 90s. Don't hold it against me. And most importantly, I knew to achieve the work success that I was looking for, I didn't really know what skills or competencies I would need yet in order to be able to achieve this. Luckily for me, in 1998, someone wrote a book on that very specific topic. You may know a gentleman called Daniel Goleman. He wrote his second book on emotional intelligence, and that book was entitled Working with Emotional Intelligence. It specifically looked at the skills and the behaviors that could make people and leaders successful in their careers. So Daniel Goleman spent time, presenting research and evidence that would start changing the way we view what's needed to achieve leadership success. So what are the behaviors of successful leaders? And for us, a good way to think about this is to think about our own experience of being led by great leaders. So I'm hoping you'll indulge me and work with me on this. Essentially, what I want you to do for a minute is to think about your best leader. It doesn't have to be your current leader, could be a leader from your past, could be a coach, doesn't have to be in your workplace, but think about your best leader and write down for me the positive characteristics that you appreciated about this leader. So I'm going to give you a couple seconds to write down some of those characteristics, things that you appreciated about this ideal leader that you had in your mind. What characteristics did they hold for you? All right. Hopefully you've got a few of those. And what I'm hoping you could do is drop one or two of those characteristics in the chat for me. Write them down, just type them in for me, a couple of those things, a long stream of them. I'm watching the chat, I'll see them. They were inclusive, they were a storyteller, they were kind, empathetic, absolutely, great. Anything else? They were trustful, so they had your trust. They cared about what you did. Absolutely. Good listener. Great. All very great characteristics. Thank you for sharing. Thank you, Dragana. Dragana said motivating. And so it's interesting to me, those characteristics, because this is what we often see from the work that we do with leaders. Essentially, we hear they were supportive, they listened, they communicated well, they were, trustworthy, they understood me. And this list is a very good representation of what you said and what we generally see like 99% of the time. And what's interesting to see here is that most of the answers talk about the reference of abilities to for the leader to have these types of skills, which leads them to be influential in their teams. What we almost never hear anybody talk about is, their expertise, their technical skills of the job. Nobody ever says, oh, geez, well, they were the best Excel spreadsheet maker ever. And now, I want to clarify and say, don't get me wrong, we're not suggesting that technical skills and expertise and knowledge are not important. They are, but they are the entry ticket to leadership as a job itself. What happens thereafter, what makes you influential is how you interact, is how those leaders interact with other people. So you may say to me, well, Angela, what does this have to do with emotional intelligence? And we say quite a lot, actually. And so if you're new to the concept of EQ, it's worth just defining this just to make sure that we're all on the same page. So emotional intelligence is your ability to recognize and understand emotions, both in yourself and in other people. And it's this ability to use this awareness to manage your behavior and your relationships. The beauty of being a human being is that we go through dozens of emotions every day. And our emotions influence how we interact with ourselves and with other people constantly in every aspect of our life. And if we don't learn how to understand those emotions and manage them, they can control us and derail our behavior with other people. So what we want to think about is this visual representation of emotional intelligence, because emotional intelligence at work looks like this. And this is what it tells us. It's that how you feel at the top of the illustration will impact how you behave. Your behaviors will impact your results. Your results impact how you think about yourself and other people, which in turn impacts how you feel. So a good way to think about this is to think about when you're feeling stressed out. How does feeling stressed affect your behavior? Well, for some people, they disappear when they're feeling stressed, right? Other people lash out and they become even an over-aggressive version of themselves. But either way, in both of these instances, it impacts your ability to reach the results that you want, which is true in leadership because how you feel will impact the behaviors necessary for you to be able to attract, retain great people on your teams. So I want to show you the model of emotional intelligence. And this is the model we use at Lead HR. It's from Multi Health Systems, which is a Canadian company. And it's predicated on the Barn-Ruven model of EQ, which was adapted by Daniel Goleman. It is these 15 competencies arranged in 5 composites that at the top you'll see start with self-perception. They essentially go through self-perception and the 3 competencies under there, like self-awareness and your self-confidence. It moves to self-expression, and this is about your ability to express yourself, to be assertive and independent. It then moves to thinking about how you interact with people, right? So your ability to be empathetic, your relationships, even your social responsibility. It then says, well, hopefully if you have good relationships, if you have a good self-regard, you have an ability to express yourself, you have good relationships, hopefully that'll drive you to make good decisions. And so inside the decision-making composite, these are things like your problem-solving ability, impulse control, reality testing. And then ultimately, if you're good at making decisions, hopefully that helps you manage your stress. So helps you be optimistic, helps you manage your stress tolerance and be flexible. And so a leader with a healthy level of emotional intelligence will also help sustain their employees, especially if you focus on a leader around particular skills like relationships, empathy, and even optimism. Because those are ones that, I mean, ultimately they're all interconnected. The 15 of them all are interconnected. But if you think about those particular three, you start with your ability to be self-aware and who you are and how you actually feel. Leaders who have great relationships, who are able to be empathetic and who can set a pace, a vision, and be optimistic and lead the team and drive the team towards, are leaders that people want to work and stay with. And so this is all encompassed or housed around the gray area, which, predicates years of research that shows that this also impacts people's overall well-being, which is, a topic we spend a lot of time talking to our clients about, and ultimately their emotional and social functioning and work performance. So there really isn't a starting point on the wheel. You can start anywhere with your leaders or with yourself if you're working on emotional intelligence. However, know that they're all interconnected. So that's one of the reasons why we love it, because one area of working on your emotional intelligence will literally float many boats. If you can imagine thinking about working on your, assertiveness and speaking up when you need to and speaking your truth, this will potentially raise your self-confidence, which hopefully then will increase your ability to make good decisions, which then hopefully could impact your stress tolerance. So you see how they're very interconnected. So what we see is decades of research to support the emotional intelligence and leadership. And I'm sure you've seen lots of this. And what, Daniel Goleman, the researcher who popularized emotional intelligence, tells us in his book is that, he came to understand that IQ and technical skills are, as I said, this ticket to leadership, but that if we only use these skills, we're very likely to be bad bosses. In fact, our EQ, including the skills of how we manage our emotions and relationships, are 2 times more important than our technical abilities. And so the higher up we go in our work life and the corporate ladder, the more important EQ becomes, because our role is more and more about managing relationships and not necessarily doing technical work. And a leader with a healthy level of emotional intelligence, really helps the organization reach their goals, because as we talked about in that little exercise we did, these are the people. These types of skills, characteristics, are the things that people remember about somebody and want to work for in that regard. So when you can develop those skills and start to hone those skills for yourself and for leaders, you automatically lift your odds of people putting exponential effort or discretionary effort to the work that you do in your organization. A study like this one is a metadata analysis. It looks at 40 different kinds of studies. It had over 65,000 participants that found that EQ was more than twice as important for leadership success. And that all of this helps us understand that EQ is not a passing fad, and that in the corporate world, it really drives results. And we talk to CEOs about this all the time. And it's critical in driving retention for organizations. What I also want to show you is the key behaviors that these 15 competencies use. So my thought is, and certainly you're more than welcome, I can send this to you afterwards, or you're welcome to take a screenshot of it. But this is an in-depth view of the 15 competencies and what they measure in the assessment. So when you think about using this while helping a leader develop, this can provide you a ton of insights on directing a leadership skills improvement conversation, so that if you know what the competency or what the composite measures, then you can measure your leaders against these kinds of things. So as an example, self-awareness. Do you understand your emotions and how they impact other people? This is often the foundation of leadership styles. If you think about the small subset of skills needed for successful leaders, their ability to be empathetic improves the impact of their messaging, right? They use their message, or they deliver a message in a more meaningful way for the listener. Their ability to handle pressure improves business outcomes. because they can step back, they can take a moment, they can engage and collaborate with people in their teams, which then fosters trust and safety and belonging, which then helps them to, be good, good business or drive good business outcomes. Their tact improves trust. Their adaptability, so their flexibility can improve, absolutely the input they get from their teams and their collaboration. Their ability to influence other people can really drive capacity and capabilities within the business for their teams to even step up. And their ability to keep their egos in check can demonstrate what good behavior in the organization looks like. So, these are great ways to think about the competencies in a way that is useful for you to think about how your leaders are performing in the 15 competencies besides just the assessment, itself. So what we wanted to also do for you was, there's tons of theory around emotional intelligence. You can see, lots of articles and, things around emotional intelligence. But one of the things we committed to in even building this with Marie and her team was, how can we give you practical tools, a practical application that you can use in your day-to-day, whether you're thinking about, attracting, whether you're thinking about how to retain talent, how you want your leaders to behave in order to be able to engage and be influential in their teams. So we wanted to do this in two ways for you. One was to provide you with interview questions that will help you gauge emotional intelligence. It's one component of your full process and your full onboarding process, but it's a good way to ask that will help you think about if the candidate or the person that you're even doing for succession planning or promotion inside your organization has some of these skills and a way to be able to measure them. So this is like, when have you felt demotivated and what did you do to overcome this? This is tied directly to self-actualization and directly to people's optimism. How do they define that for you? How do they think about that and articulate that to you? What is something that you've achieved that you're most proud of? This is tied, again, directly to people's self-regard, their ability to be confident in where they are, to be able to explain that to you. How do you celebrate success? Lots of people are very successful, but they don't take the time to celebrate success. Why is that? Is that tied to the way they feel about themselves? And are they aware enough to be able to celebrate success? Can they do that for themselves and for their teams? How do you recover from failure? One of the questions further down the list. This is directly impacts the way people think about their flexibility, their optimism, their impulse control, because they, how they answer these types of questions give you insight into those competencies, those skills, that skill set. What kind of behavior at work makes you annoyed? It's an interesting question to also think about people's independence and their assertiveness. How can they actually express that? How do they actually know what makes them annoyed? Are they self-aware enough to be able to articulate that and know what that feeling is so that they can actually manage that and then work through that when they're working with teams? How do you de-stress after a bad day of work? This is an interesting one around people's, self-awareness, around their ability to problem solve, manage their stress. Because if they can't do these things, they don't have mechanisms to do that, again, gives you some insight into, how they think about themselves, how they think about their work, and how they think ultimately about how they're going to show up inside their teams. The other one that I wanted to show you, and I'm happy to answer questions on this after as well. The other one I wanted to show you is around 4 practical tips that if you're going to use to increase your own emotional intelligence, or you want to use them to increase your team's emotional intelligence or your leader's emotional intelligence, I wanted to shed some light with some reflection questions for you and some things that you could think about and that you could implement right away. And I'm happy to give these to you after. Miriam, we talked a little bit about a little takeaway. And if you see my screen, that's this concept of these 4 places, and I'll of these 4 tips, and I'm happy to share those with the group after, so I can give those away at the end. So take time to check in with yourself. This is the competency of self-awareness. The key insight here is that taking time to understand how you feel gives you more control over changing your emotions and your behaviors to something that's more productive for you. So, we say at Lead HR all the time, you can't manage what you don't recognize. And that's absolutely true about self-awareness. If you don't recognize how you feel or how you work through those, what's the tingly sensation that happens to you? What's the way that manifests for you? You have no shot of being able to change it in the moment. So reflection questions that you can use on self-awareness is, think of a time where you were making a decision when your emotions got the best of you. What were you experiencing at that time? And what was your reaction to that? We all have triggers. Being able to understand what those triggers are help you to show up as the best version of yourself. What emotions make you a more effective leader? Do you know what those are? Can you deploy those more often? And what emotions do you think help you influence and inspire your team? So when you think about those are great reflection questions, even if you want to use them for yourself or you want to use them for your leaders, to really be able to think about how are they impacting their teams. So a practical tip for you is, set your smartphone alarm and make it ring twice a day. When it rings, basically take 1 minute to identify how you feel right in that moment. I don't know if this ever happens to you, but I can sometimes find myself with not even knowing. I will check myself, put my feet on the floor and realize that my shoulders are up here. And that's because I'm feeling all of this in myself. And I just literally need to drop that back down again. But I don't know that unless I check in with myself and I recognize when I'm feeling that way. And just a very small movement or standing up helps me get repositioned for, my next conversation, my next call, my next, difficult conversation or feedback session with somebody in my team. The second one is around show care for others. And this is the competency of empathy. The key insight here is that empathy is the ability to recognize, understand, and appreciate the way other people feel. It is a critical component in building strong relationships. And as a leader, your ability to manage those relationships is really your medium, your delivery mechanism for taking your teams to even bigger heights, bigger outcomes than you could have even imagined. And so the reflection question for empathy is for you to think of a situation where you weren't maybe as sensitive to someone's feelings as you should have been. Lots of times we recognize that after the fact, after we walk away from a conversation. So why do you think that was the case? And what could you have done differently? If you don't answer or push yourself to think about what you could do differently, then, how do you get to a different outcome or a different, practice? So the practical tip is that empathy really starts by noticing how other people may feel. So next time you meet somebody, take a mindful moment to notice their facial expressions. What emotion do you think they might be expressing? Can you actually name it? Can you articulate that? Do you think you actually could recognize what that is? In the day-to-day, very busy work that we have, it's sometimes much easier said than done. We are worried about our agenda, our thing, what we want to get done, what message we want to deliver, but the person that's standing in front of you, how do you keep them whole? So that's the second one. The third one is about reducing your stress, and there's tons of content around this, but I want to just talk to you specifically about the EQ competency of this and what's the reflection of that. But that is about stress tolerance for sure. But stress management is like a superpower in emotional intelligence. It really is, because being able to lower your stress increases your capabilities in all other aspects of emotional intelligence. So the reflection question for you is, what skills or techniques or activities do you use to manage your day-to-day stress? Do you have some? Do you know what they are? Do you do them intentionally and purposefully? And most people tell us yes, but link that to how it's how you show up, because how do you think your team has been affected by your ability to either handle or not handle stress? And so when we ask leaders that question, it's like, I maybe think I do a good job of masking that. Maybe, maybe not. And what is the trigger that creates in your team to not come to you, to come to you more often, to not escalate, to not tell you when something's not going right in the business because they're worried about your reaction to that? What does that look like? So the practical tip of that is, as I said, there's tons of work on that: yoga, meditation, breathing exercises, the 4-box, physical activity. Pick one strategy and test that out, even for a couple of weeks, and see if that has an impact for the way you show up or the way you feel. And then the fourth one is practicing the glass half full. And this is the EQ competency of optimism. And this is the ability to remain positive despite setbacks. It's really a crucial differentiator between successful leaders and other people in the workplace. This skill, this competency, optimism, combined with one of the other competencies in emotional intelligence, which is reality testing, is this ability to have a positive outlook. And I'm not talking Pollyanna, like, sunshine and rainbows all the time. That's not what I mean. I mean the fact that, would you describe yourself as somebody who can work through, understand that there are setbacks, there are things that will happen in your business, in your life, in your work, in your role as a leader, but that knowing that if you look at it, get feedback, use your relationships, collaborate, whatever that is, that you can essentially get yourself to a good outcome, a good outlook. And so the reflection questions we use is, would you describe yourself as having a positive or negative expectations about how things will turn out? I often coach people who say, no, I start with the worst case scenario every time. And it's like, okay, and that may work for you. How does that impact the people around you? Would they consider you to be an optimistic person? Or are you, as the leader, the person that always says, no, that won't work? Or, but that's a problem, but this is that. Oh, we tried that last time. And leaders often don't recognize when they're doing those things, and those literally disengage employees. And so your language matters in that particular, scenario. And so how do you keep your teams motivated in the face of obstacles? What are the things that you use, that you think about, and do you know what they are, and can you deploy them when you need them? So a practical tip for you is, before starting a project, write down everything that comes to mind, relating to how your project will be successful. And then write down everything you need to do in order for that project to go well. It's almost like a manifestation of that working out for you. What are all those things that you need in order to make that successful? And then, hang on to that, because that will get you in the mind frame of working towards what that would look like. It's true about problem solving, and it's also true about optimism. Okay, so that is a couple of two main areas that we really wanted to give you access to and to talk to you a little bit about. It is a condensed speed round version of emotional intelligence. Marie, it is exactly 12:05. I will stop sharing my screen so that we could talk a little bit about If people have any questions or if there's anything they're specifically interested in or interested in talking about, I'm happy to do that for the next few minutes before we turn it back over to you. All right.
Yeah. Sorry,
That's
Angela.
okay.
I was trying to figure out my audio here, and for some
No
reason
worries.
my screen escaped me. So as I mentioned before, perhaps we could encourage people to put some questions, and we do have a couple of questions actually.
Yep.
So I'll just start off with the first question actually is, do you have any examples of leaders who practice EI and do it well?
Yeah, we see leaders, we see good leaders doing this often, right? We catch leaders doing good work often. If you could, there's a great, I'm sorry, I'm just looking at my book here. I'm just going to my bookcase. There's a great work from the CEO of Kronos, and the book is called Work Inspired. Aaron Ain is the CEO, was the CEO of the organization Kronos, if you know them, Kronos.
Yes.
They are, his book is about how to build an organization where people love to work. And he has some really great, examples of what he might not deem as emotional intelligence, but are certainly characteristics of emotional intelligence. And those include things like his ability to hold good relationships, his ability to be empathetic, and his ability, if you read the book, to really show how he created a vision for the organization and led it forward, which is really tied to his self-actualization and his optimism. So that's a really great one.
Great. I've written that down, so I'm anxious to see if I can find that.
Yes.
The next question is, do you have any resources for developing EQ?
For sure. And there are lots of, different models for emotional intelligence. The one we showed you is one model. That's multi-health systems. That's the model we use at Lead HR. But there, if you know EQ Smart or Daniel Goleman's work, they have different kind of versions of EQ. But there are like some really great books that are written by Dr. Stein, Dr. Stephen Stein, which one of them is called The EQ Edge. It's emotional intelligence and your success. So it's a couple of versions. David Stein actually has 2 or 3 books. Any of his work is great. There are also, if you have a subscription, to Harvard Business Review or HBR, or have access to some of HBR stuff, they have some really great work on emotional intelligence as well. As I promised, I will send you this piece, which has the reflection questions and the insights for each of the 4 that I showed you. So you're welcome to have that. And then if you follow some leaders who do work on emotional intelligence, they often share, tips, workshops, things that would be great for you to be able to use. Lead HR does that. So if you're on LinkedIn, feel free to, follow us. We do things like the interview questions. We do things like how to increase team building and communication by using gratitude exercises. So there's lots of different places that you could find some of that. Hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you. Oh, it definitely is. And I just wanted to make a comment before we get to our next question, because I remember, as you said, we had a leader, and because he, I believe, practiced EQ very well, he had such an impact. It's somebody that I've remembered for years, and it'll be somebody that I'll always remember for the rest of my life, actually.
Yes.
So we have one other question. Is there any EI test or assessment that can be done to reflect the areas of improvement?
Yes. Absolutely. So there are a couple. There are a couple free resources online. If you sort of do like EQ assessment, they're very small, kind of, just high level conversations about emotional intelligence. That's one way. If you're really strapped and you're just looking for a free resource. The MHS model that I showed you, multi-health systems model, is actually an assessment. It's 133 questions online, which then gives you a score and rating and a practical development plan for your leader in that assessment. So it's a 27-page report that comes out in that. And so that's the work we do. So when we do emotional intelligence work, we assess the leader and then we work on those competencies. There is, again, as I talked to you about EQ Smart and Daniel Goleman's work, they also have assessments. So there are quite a few assessments ranging from free to, a few $100. And so there's a couple that you could utilize. And if you're interested in the one that we have with MHS, happy to chat with you about it some more. And you can actually even go to leadhr.com and see how we use the assessment.
Okay. There is one other one here. It says, would be interested in how you gently influence EQ awareness live while in group meetings. That's a great one.
It is absolutely a great one. Because I often say, like, you can only impact or influence your own behavior, but there are setups or things that you could do to try and influence or, backdoor that or engineer to some extent. So one of those is, one of the ones that we encourage teams to do, which is if they don't start with, once a quarter, maybe a gratitude exercise, like, I appreciate X about Mary Jane or, Susie Smith. And those are great ways to create, to impact your relationships and increase your relationships. There are absolutely, empathy is one of the topics that often we have leaders either struggle with being able to articulate or exercise. And what we try to get people to do is think about empathy as clarity. So clarity around expectations, clarity around making sure that you're communicating with the individual in an appropriate way. That is empathetic behavior as a leader, because you are helping them to see how they can be the best version of themselves by giving them clarity around your expectation as their boss. So that is a very good way. The other way is you could start by modeling the behavior of using your emotional expression, like instead of just feeling stressed or I'm like, oh my gosh, I got this going. Explain why this makes you feel that way. So I feel X and Y, or I'm feeling like this because of this. And that helps people to see that what's the why behind what you're saying or what you're doing, which gives people an understanding that you're transparent, you're being authentic about where you are and what you feel. And that is a great way to model authenticity, building trust, safety in your workplace, belonging, all those kinds of things. Hopefully that answers the question.
And I couldn't agree more, because I think sometimes when you understand what's happening in a room, and then somebody's feeling overwhelmed or stressed, it could actually change your outlook on how to approach things throughout the day. So I do totally agree with that.
I have one more.
Sure.
Marie, that I'm sorry. I just thought of it, and I really want to give this one, because this is sometimes one that people get hung up on, and that's around, people who take up all the air in a meeting, for example. And so when you have people in your meeting who you're the leader, and you have people in your meeting who don't speak up, or you have the same group of people who, speak first, that is perhaps a person on your team who is not displaying their assertiveness. And so one of the things that you could help them do is, if you provide an agenda in advance of your meeting, some people don't process information the same way. They need to think about it, right? They're not really great on the fly. They don't like ideate while they're speaking out loud like I do. I can, be talking and thinking at the same time. Some people need more time to actually put their thoughts together before they actually speak. And so if you're the leader and if you can create opportunity where everybody's voice gets heard at the table and you encourage it by taking somebody's comment, but then stopping, pausing, and asking other people if they have contribution and waiting to see if they do, that is a great way to help people use their own voice.
That's a great comment. Thank you, Angela.